I've always believed that I'd have a much easier time getting into the UFC than a wrestling promotion like WWE for one of many reasons, one of which is the working out. I've never been a huge fan of working out for aesthetic. My ideal physique is literally Israel Adesanya without the gyno, so if you were to find me in the gym doing any exercise that isn't strictly for functionality, you got the wrong black man. But that's the thing with wrestling. It's physically demanding in all aspects, aesthetically and functionally. And by the end of this video, I hope to convince you that pro wrestlers are more injury prone than MMA fighters. And if you don't want to hear it from me, hear it from Ken Shamrock, who pursued pro wrestling after retiring from MMA.
Pro wrestling is where I get more damage. I got more damage. MMA is an area where I was good, right? So when I went into a fight, I could finish a guy in a minute, 2 minutes, and on to the next.
Keep in mind, there are a lot of fighters that are similar to Ken Shamrock in a sense that they take little to no damage because of stylistic matchups. Take fighters like Khamzat Chimaev and Jailton Almeida. Early in their UFC careers, they were steamrolling all of their opponents because they didn't have the defensive grappling arsenal to defend their wrestling. They would submit them early or just land ground and pound, taking little to no damage. Take Khamzat Chimaev. At some point in his career, he had only taken about 4 significant strikes. That was over the course of multiple fights.
Even when I had tough fights, I was good enough not to take damage because I'd take them down. I didn't get into the slug matches with people. I took them down, worked the submission game, less damage. When I went into a pro wrestling ring, I had to give them my body. Like, it wasn't like I could defend myself and stop them from slamming me. They're going to slam me because that's part of the program.
Like, bro, how much more proof do we need? And I'm sure a lot of you that don't even watch wrestling have seen that iconic clip of Brock Lesnar botching a shooting star press. Like, bro, think of all the other fighters in the promotion that have moves like this where they dive off the top ropes and land head first as one of their signatures of finishing moves. Take Chris Benoit, for instance. He had a move called the diving headbutt, bro. The diving freaking headbutt. That is advanced CTE. That is a CTE speed run. Yuri Prohaska wouldn't freaking do that. And Chris Benoit is among the wrestlers and perhaps athletes who had one of the worst cases of CTE. We'll get into that a little later. Moving on to the next WWE legend, Jake the Snake Roberts shares how tight his schedule was as a wrestler.
You know, they would be like, okay, next. Who's the next guy?
Yeah, but if you're in MMA, you only do it, what, once, twice a year?
Yeah.
In wrestling, you're doing it 7 days a week.
That's right.
You know, and everyone's expected to take steroids. You know, everyone's expected to be huge and perfectly fit and, you know, and so forth.
That is the key difference. And I know a lot of fans are going to say, yeah, but MMA fighters train outside of their training camps. But dude, if they're fighting once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year if they're lucky, I don't think they're going to be training throughout the entire year. If anything, that's probably not even advisable. And even if they are, I still don't think it compares to what a wrestler has to go through because at this point in our lives, we've already established that wrestling is choreographed. And aside from memorizing all of their cues, they still have to look like a jacked behemoth. The physiques we see in the WWE are hard to obtain with or without the steroids. If anything, I think it's a form of ignorance to try to downplay their physiques and just say, no, they use steroids, that's why they're so damn big. I challenge you to take the same steroids they're taking and see how good you will look. You will not look even half as good as they do unless you put in the work. I just think it's funny how some people think steroids are some magic potion because it improves muscle mass, strength, and athletic performance. And don't get me wrong, I still do agree that it's unethical to take them in a sport where they're banned because it will give you an advantage over your opponents. But to prove that steroids don't make you a freaking immortal, we've seen so many athletes that took steroids, yet they didn't reach the heights of their counterparts. Take Alistair Overeem, for example. He was a beast in his prime. I'm sure you guys have seen that Brock Lesnar fight. All these performances, yet he never touched gold, not even once. And it's not that he isn't championship material. It's because he existed in an area where there were other fighters that were also championship material, and they just so happened to be better than him. My main point is that yes, I am aware that WWE wrestlers do take steroids, but with how often they're either practicing or working out in general, they're still more likely to get injured than MMA fighters. Now coming back to Chris Benoit, I'm sure a few of you guys are aware that he had one of the worst cases of CTE in pro wrestling history, but this article suggests otherwise. Let me read. In a June 26 statement, the WWE said steroids, open quote, were not and could not be related to the cause of death, close quote, and that the findings indicate, open quote, deliberation, not rage, close quote. It added that Benoit tested negative for anabolic steroids on April 10th, his last date of the testing.
My friend that I knew that took care of me, that was so good to me, the friend that I knew didn't do that. The CTE that destroyed his brain caused him to do that.
I don't know what the truth is, but one thing I do know is that it's possible to ingest steroids and they become untraceable in your system, yet the effects remain there for months, for example. So that could be the case for Benoit. And the fact that he left the Bible next to his family after he offed them just makes it sound more like psychosis. Perhaps it was CTE-induced psychosis. I don't know. And I just hate how the internet has convinced us into feeling we always need to pick a side, even on things we're not fully informed on. That's a recipe for disaster. I referred to Chris Benoit to show you guys that just because wrestling isn't necessarily a combat sport, it doesn't mean that the athletes aren't prone to having the same injuries as MMA fighters, if not worse. So anyway, you guys let me know which one you think is worse in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.